You are listening to Workplace Stories, a podcast by Red Thread Research about the near future of work.
I'm Stacia Garr, co-founder and principal analyst at Red Thread.
And I'm Danny Johnson, co-founder and principal analyst at Red Thread.
And I'm Chris Pirrie from the Learning Futures Group.
The team would like to thank Visier and Degreed for their sponsorship of this podcast season, The Skills Odyssey 2. Degreed is the upskilling platform that connects learning to opportunities. It integrates everything people use to learn and build their careers, including skill insights, LMSs, courses, videos, articles, and projects, and matches everyone to growth opportunities that fit their unique skills, roles, and goals. Visier is the recognized leader in people analytics and workforce planning. With Visier, organizations can answer questions that shape business strategy, provide the impetus for taking action, and drive better business outcomes through workforce optimization. Visier has 11,000 customers in 75 countries.
I'm a hiker, explorer, futurist, digital evangelist, but at the core of it, I really love being an HR professional. My mission in life and at work is to design the future that loves us all.
In this episode, we talk to Manisha Singh. She is the Vice President of Employee Experience, People Analytics, and Digital HR Operations at AstraZeneca. She's also led talent, people strategy, and digital transformation projects, including the future of work, at Schneider Electric, which we will cover in our conversation today. She's also been at AXA, Tata, and a number of other global companies. She's incredibly active in this discipline. She's a research affiliate for MIT Office of Digital Learning and Future of Work. She's also an active fellow in AI for Humanity, creating an advocacy for adoption of higher ethical standards in our digital future. She's a leading voice in HR technology and employee experience, and, like me, she's senior faculty at the Josh Bersin Academy. This is a really great conversation to add to our Skills Odyssey. Manisha understands the vision and promise of a skills-based approach, but she also brings a clarity of thought, a wealth of practical experience, and she's not shy about sharing what's hard and what hasn't worked so well. Manisha describes herself as a system thinker, a futurist that believes that HR is the conscience keeper of business, and that human capital is a key differentiator, and that the future is human. You're going to hear all that passion and all that experience in this great conversation between Danny, Stacia, myself, and today's guest, Manisha Singh.
Hi, Manisha, and welcome to Workplace Stories. Thanks so much for your time today and for sharing your thoughts with our audience.
Hello there, and thank you so much for having me.
So we're going to start off with some quick introductory questions to help our listeners understand who you are and your work practice, and then we'll go deeper on this whole topic of skills. So can you give us first just a quick sense of, you're at AstraZeneca. What is AstraZeneca, its mission, and its purpose?
Well, AstraZeneca is a global, science-led, patient-focused biopharmaceutical company. We are $30 billion, 78,000 plus employees spread in 70 plus countries. We have drugs in specialty area and therapy areas as well. Oncology, CVRM, respiratory, and immunology are our focus area. I think one of the things to know about AstraZeneca is we're really passionate about pushing the boundaries of science to accelerate delivery of life-changing medicine for our patients. Mm-hmm. So if you will look at all pharma companies, compared to most of them, we really invest a lot more in R&D, and not just today when we are very profitable, but right from the day when we started our turnaround 6 years back to be profitable. So really committed to a purposeful science in service of patients.
Great. Well, that's helpful context, particularly as we're talking about innovation and that connection to skills. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your title, and how you describe the work that you do?
I always say introductory questions are hardest for me, but let's say, I love what Chris said. I'm a hiker, explorer, futurist, digital evangelist, but at the core of it, I really love being an HR professional. my mission in life and at work is design the future that loves us all. So through HR or the various chairs or function or roles that I've got in HR, I've always tried to build progressive, fair, equitable people practices. My current title is VP of People Analytics, Digital Employee Experience at AstraZeneca, which means I globally head this function. And as head of the function in each of these areas, I service business and employ an organization to get future ready. As workforce insights and analytics leader, I provide data-based decision-making for initiatives like DEI, pay equity, and workforce transformation. As digital head, I work with CDO and digital board of the company, working on flexibility, work of the future policy, and also digital experiences and simplification. And as an HR operations leadership team member, we coined a sentence, we call it to make HR faster, smarter, and efficient. So whatever it takes, whatever kind of combination of work it takes.
So you are relatively new to AZ. Can you tell us a little bit about where you were before? Because we're going to talk about, I think, both experiences.
So yes, I've just been with AZ for 1.25 of a year. And prior to this, I've spent almost 4.5 years at Schneider Electric, based in Boston. And I was heading the global digital transformation of HR. And I got to work on lots of transformative programs, learning experience strategy and architecture, open talent market, which we pioneered, and I'm very proud of that. High performing analytics ecosystem, we actually rebuilt it twice in 4 years, and Schneider is still pioneer. I think the way we build the data strategy and architecture was phenomenal. And the whole employee experience, what does it take to build a futuristic employee experience, and how can you think strategically about it?
Interesting. So there's obviously a very strong, data, tech, employee experience thread through all of this. How did you come to do this type of work?
That's a great question. When I was looking at the flow, I did like every other young HR professional. I started in young talent management, talent acquisition, campuses, branding. But very soon I realized that I have a little bit of affinity for solving complex systemic problems in HR or organization. So I quoted a lot more talent and OD were my first love in HR. And I remember in 2003 or 4, I took Peter Senge's learning organization and went to my CHR and said, we should be working on culture. There's no point working on leadership. And culture was big, fluffy, complex topic. I think even today for many CHRs, he advised me saying, you should stay away from something like that, because once you get into it, there's no outcome that you're getting out of it. But that's what I went solving for. And I grew into talent and OD head. I got to serve as talent and OD head of 3 big corporations, including EXA in Asia Pacific. And after that, I hit refresh as I hit mid-career and came to Sloan for an immersion and kind of gathering. And that's where I realized the power of digital in the hand of HR leaders to enable next phase of acceleration. So post that, I quoted assignments at the intersection of HR strategy, digital, and process transformation. But I was very clear, I don't want to go into HR tech roles, but the roles which demanded, intersection of strategy and HR strategy and transformation with digital.
I love how you were just an example of learning, of continuous reinvention. You mentioned, you kind of started in some of the more traditional HR activities, but taking, the courage to step back for a little bit and say, where next? I just think that's so admirable.
I really love the term you used, reset, which I think is a great way to think about it. And we are hearing it a little bit in the context of skills, because if you get down to the skill level, it allows you to do a reset in ways that you can't if you're always focused on roles.
I think only now in last 5-6 years, we've all started to hear about career as constellation of experiences and not just a hierarchical path and what particular specialization. So when I was making these moves, it was full of risk, right? It was not like you should stick to it, but I kind of always followed my gut. And that's why I also realized, it's not just just that I professionally believe or propagate that, but I have seen firsthand the benefit of being able to transition from one to another very smoothly. Be it the sector, your skills are really transferable.
Yeah.
And you should not box yourself into one particular thing. I actually also worked at intersection of HR and strategy for 3 years. I worked in strategy team for business transformation. So
I love the fact that you're drawing a connection between skills and flexibility and those types of things. The other thing that I love is your sentiment earlier. You said, I do this work because I want to create a future that loves everybody. That was I love the way that was phrased. I think it was beautiful. And I think the way that we get there is through taking a look at, skills, because it is kind of a great equalizer across everything. Just a little bit of context setting. So this season is about skills. We called it the Skills Odyssey because so many people are trying to figure it out and there's no right answer and there are monsters and all kinds of things that happen as you figure it out. How would you define skills?
I have romantic notion of skills. To me, skills is that powerful tool which HR can use to create those meaningful work. We're all talking about work as a tool to kind of connect you to your purpose. But we've been talking about it since ages. Skills is a tool which can really help us craft those kind of meaningful experiences, create lifelong employability opportunities, and kind of democratize the growth and all kind of growth, economic growth and career growth opportunities for people. Technically speaking, we can define skill as granular ability or expertise to do a job well. So it's not just about knowing it. It's really about our ability to execute it. And it's not dependent on acquiring a professional degree or a certificate or going to school, right? You can also acquire a skill by practicing it. And that's why it is so refreshing and different.
And I love this too, because in that statement, you actually said it's good for the individual and it's good for the organization. So as an individual, you can sort of recognize your love and your passion where you want to be through this idea of skills. And you don't need to go back to school to do that. You can do it through practice. But you also mentioned how this idea of skills can affect organizations and economies and all kinds of things. It's not just the individual. It's the individual and the organization and the economy and the industry where it sort of happens.
I wanted to build on that part, Danny. Actually, skills, we were talking about, I joined the workforce in 2001, I think, and I entered with Tata's in a manufacturing company. And my first assignment was also to map world-class manufacturing competencies. So we were always talking about, and competencies, the way we defined it then was skills, attitude, and, knowledge to do the work. But the dictionaries became so complex that by the time you mapped it in 18 months, in another 6 months, they became outdated.
Yeah.
And still some of us tried to make good use of it. But when I think the World Economic Forum started publishing their Future of the Jobs report, and I think they did beautiful job of statistically making this complex topic very simple because they mapped the direction in which jobs and skills were moving, right? And at the pace that it were moving. They mapped it for countries, they mapped it for industry sectors. So for example, we can look at pharma map. We can look at how skills US will do in skills versus UK will do in skills.
Yeah.
I think that brought the subject of skill to the forefront. And secondly, the digital and data acceleration forced the business to look at the pace of change. It was no more 5-year plan, 3 years plan. We are looking at changing 10, 20, 30% of our business value chain every year, or now maybe every 6 months in pandemic days. I think those two things put together brought the skill conversation, absolutely at the center of enterprise strategy, and hence HR strategy, and also economies, like you said, for countries and sectors.
So I want to deep dive that just a little bit, because what you're actually talking about is like, if you don't have a 5-year plan anymore, you need a 6-month plan. And that talks to agility. I know in our pre-call, you mentioned agility and how skills are critical to it. Could you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. So look, if you look at pharma, we have had 10 years of drug discovery process, right? It would take us 10 years. And if you look at the pandemic, the whole vaccine design, discovery, and manufacturing process have been shrunk to 6 months to 18 months process. in the digital era, the pharma companies are also going to become digital healthcare companies. So we are no more just going to be working at the preventive end of wellness, but the entire wellness chain, how to take proactive care. It's a complete wellness chain. So if you look at the value chain of the business, from preventive to complete wellness, from, kind of being a lab-based drug discovery process to digital data, AI-based drug discovery process, 10 years value chain to like 18 months, and also hyper-personalized medication. I'm just talking to you about very broad-based pharma. And if you look at all these responses, the current report says by 2030, a lot of this will happen. Uh-huh. We are in 2022, 8 years. So if in 8 years we have to make so much shift, we are already making a lot of shift with every passing year. Very micro example, like the way we sell. We used to sell earlier by really physically, medical sales representatives would go and meet people, doctors in the field. In the pandemic, it completely shifted virtual. And we had to literally train the sales force to do that virtual thing. So, we were talking about agility. In 6 months' time, we had to really retrain, retool, reskill our sales force and repurpose our commercial distribution value chain to operate so that we can continue to survive and not just thrive. So that's what agility is. And I think it works at both levels. The enterprise has to be agile to adapt to the changing business needs, but also the individual in those roles have to be agile. And the choice that stared us, or the choice that is in front of every organization, is you can't hire and fire the big chunk of people. You can't say that, now we have to become digital salespeople, so let's hire everybody who's already doing digital sales and we do away, because it's a consultative selling. It's a very unique skill. So, it's really, agility is central, and focusing on skills, saying we have 60% of the skills and these are the additional 10% that we need to build, helps you stay in the game and move at a faster pace.
My husband and I were looking at COVID tests and sort of comparing the 20 different brands of COVID tests. And it was really interesting that one of the columns for comparison was, does it require an app? And so if you think about the way that you market and the value chain that you just talked about, having to prepare an app to go with a test is probably a completely different mindset for your industry than ever before, but it also provides all kinds of opportunities, right? So collection of data and making sure that data is getting fed back in so it feeds your system faster and all that kind of stuff. I think it's a really interesting idea.
Every drug that we used to sell is now becoming a platform, a digital platform, and giving a lifestyle solution around it to our patients.
Well, Manisha, I'm going to step in here if I can. We're very greedy. And, we're so excited to have you on the show. And we figured we could get 2 case studies for the price of one because of your recent experience. No, seriously, I think really, really interested in how pressures and forces at work on business that are driving change. And you talk about the shift in the drug industry, how that is driving this different approach to talent and this sort of skill-centric approach. So if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind understanding a little bit at Schneider Electric, what was the shift there that was driving the need to operate through this skills lens?
Schneider Electric is another very, very beautiful purpose-driven company. It operates in the energy sector, and it originally was manufacturer of electrical product, industrial and retail of all kind. But as the world is moving in the digital era, so is Schneider, because if they keep manufacturing the industrial electrical equipment, then somebody else will come on top of it and start providing the digital and analytic solution. Schneider is morphing into becoming digital energy automation company, providing end-to-end solutions to its customer. So the big burning platform for business transformation in Schneider Electric is how do we accelerate that digital transformation? And in that context, as HR, our job was how can we support businesses in doing that?
Love it. And what was your work in that focus on skills, and what did you specifically work on and build to try and build skills into the ecosystem?
We were trying to solve skills-related problem from a couple of different angles, just like every organization, because it's a journey. I think we're talking about still 4 or 5 years back. Now I think few organizations are at least trying to think about solving skills problem holistically, but that was also time. So I'll tell you a couple of angles with which we were trying to solve the problem, different use cases. How do we identify and rate what digital skills we have today in the workforce? And what is our level of readiness? Because how do you accelerate digital transformation if you don't know what's the status of your digital skills? So that was one use case. How do we do that? Second was, how do we make it easy to hire for digital skills that we do not have? So once we identify what is our skill sets, what we don't have, how do we hire? And then when we realize the gap between what we have and what we don't have, we looked at this beautiful new emerging job roles on UX, design, digital marketing, analytics, data science. So then we had a paradox. We had internal employees looking for career opportunities, and we had this cool job for which we are going out and hiring. So our third use case was, how can we go deep into our own 144,000 employees across 100 countries and pick up those gems who are on their own not surfacing, not coming up? How can we surface them for these kind of job opportunities?
Got it. I'm really interested to learn what you learned from that process and maybe what you're taking forward. And something you said earlier has kind of really struck me, this previous generation of this work where we really got wrapped around the axle on building incredibly complex models and capability models. How did you approach it differently at Schneider, and what did you learn through that process?
So we tried to solve each of these use cases, Chris, because now I have come to an understanding how these use cases will mesh together and how, but at that time, we said, okay, each use case, let's treat it differently. Let's not try to make it super complex and cook it all together, because then it will become a multi-year program. For example, to identify how is our digital skill sets today, we actually went to LinkedIn, and I think out of 144,000, we had 65,000 plus employees present on LinkedIn. And we looked at their data set saying, because their HCM profile in our system would be like outdated compared to their LinkedIn profiles, which are much current. So we looked at that data. We scraped it in our studio to look at how is this profile looking at an aggregate level, what skill sets we have. And then we send it out to employees to validate. So that was very quick and dirty, smart way to look at the whole skill picture and using LinkedIn's ontology in the back end. We also talked to LinkedIn to say, you have this current digital skills. Can you give us that? I again spoke to them when I'm in AZ, but I think they're still working on figuring out how to kind of structure their ontology and in a way make it available like MC does or Burning Glass does. So that's not yet available. It's a work in progress. So that's one problem that we solved. Second problem was this, the most interesting one we solved was like, how do we hire for digital skills and how do we make these roles available for internal employees? And that's where, Chris, to your point, I remembered how complex was competency model and actually used this argument to not select some vendors. So we went into the market. We were doing 2-3 things simultaneously. We were trying to solve our problem on paper, theoretically, to say if we had ideal technology, what would solution look like from employee persona, from manager persona? And then we went to the market looking at open-minded, all kind of tools that we had. And that's when we kind of partnered with a very early stage Israeli startup. We almost literally co-created the product because the vision of the product that we had was not existent in the market. And this was an early startup. It had just one more big customer, enterprise customer working. And when they looked at our vision, they literally got the 3-year product roadmap. So they love to partner with us and we love to partner with them. That's how Open Talent Market was born. And we kind of chose algorithms. So we said we will not be feeding job descriptions or the competencies within the job description. We want an algorithm which can actually infer the skills from the job, and an algorithm which can infer skills from the profile and then do the matching. And can that matching be based on lots of options, not just Manisha's past history, but let's say if Manisha has worked in HR, but she wants to work in digital marketing. So it should also take Manisha's choice and give it equal weightage. So, those kind of dimensions. So we tried to keep employee experience at the center of it and same progressive design principles. Otherwise, there were lots of algorithms which were working much more effectively, but they were back-end tools where HR would match to open position employees and say, here are 10 employees. We didn't want any of that. In a way, we took away power from HR to say, if you're a manager, Chris or Stacey, we go there, post your job, post your projects, and people can apply in flip seconds.
What I'm getting from the picture overall is that you had a pretty experimental mindset and you were also kind of using what you had at hand. I love the LinkedIn example. That's already there. It's powered by the individual, right? So there's some authenticity there. And then you layer sort of tools on top of that. Is there anything else before we move on to AZ that you are bringing forward from that experience? Any results that you came up with that you're particularly proud of, or any approaches that you want to replicate?
So there's one more thing that we were doing, at Schneider. I think a couple of things were working for us to be able to experiment on something this strategic at this scale, because when you look at open talent market, it's not just a small pilot. It's a big cultural shift. It's a mindset shift for leaders. It's a behavioral shift, which will make something like this successful. So, we kind of brought HR leaders together and business leaders together and supporting the HR strategy. We build a digital game plan. And in that digital game plan, skills, open talent market, they became very important. And we built a pilot sequentially saying, if we succeed in this, if this AI platform can help us solve the skill problem, then it's well and good. Because only after you execute that you realize that, this has added another layer of complexity. So now I have open talent market. I have algorithm, which is giving me data. I have LXP, a learning experience platform, where there's another skill index, which is helping me recommend the learning. And then how do I which one of
how do they talk to each other?
Workforce planning. Yeah. And then how do I keep it dynamic? So I think that problem we solved. We were working on with Accenture Zord Design House in Schneider on saying, what is the future employee experience architecture? And again, when we say employee experience, I think it's not a misnomer. It's really employee experience in terms of what are the issues the employee want technology to solve for them. Not just service, not just self-service or few less click. So employees really wanted to know career GPS, just like I put a destination and I know what does it take to get there. So when we were creating an architecture, we could see very clearly that we need a separate skill inventory somewhere at some point of time. So that would be one future project that we would work on.
So you had this great momentum at Schneider, but you made the choice to move over to AZ. So you come over to AstraZeneca, and were you brought in specifically to help with skills? Was that the remit, or where was the skills odyssey for AZ when you came in?
So when my mandate in AZ was to really help AZ get ready to deliver 2025 transformation, We have a 2025 business plan. There is a HR strategy supporting that. And one of the three pillars of HR strategy, the central pillar, is digital and data. So was to define digital and data game plan. And when we looked at defining that, it was really to say which pillars cut across all COEs in HR and are absolutely central to delivering a people strategy. And that's where skills came into picture. We looked at some other aspects as well. We looked at workforce planning. We looked at skills. We looked at continuous listening skills. We looked at simplifying employee experiences. So that's where skill became central because rewards wanted to pay for skills at some point of time. Learning wanted to build multi-year career development strategy and game plan basis on skills. We in people analytics and business partners, they wanted to build skill-based workforce plan because otherwise they had very broad headcount number-based plans. Mm-hmm. So that's how skill became a central problem.
So that was the problem that you kind of came into a year ago. Can you talk to us a little bit about, it's one thing to say, hey, we need this, we're bringing something new in to do it. And it's another thing to start to get leaders on board and to create a vision for what you're trying to do. So can you maybe first talk to us about what that vision was, like once you kind of got your feet underneath you, what that vision was that you created, if it was what you just said, cool. But if there was more to it than that, and then how you went about getting leaders on board to support this new vision.
See, I think in a way, it's always a collaborative effort. So we had people from learning, people from talent, people from reward. So at first stage, I always reach out to these people because they have a business use case for where they want to use skills. Then we also went to a couple of business HR leaders, and we created a team of 5-6 evangelists who all wanted to use skills. And the first step was really to educate them based on my prior experience to say, instead of tackling this problem separately, it makes sense for us to go together because the data architecture and framework that we need is going to be common, and then use cases could be different. So if we all can pool in together, it will be easier to create buy-in with the leadership, the business leadership, as well as HR leadership. And, then we had to look at the business problems that this will help us solve. And so we were actually interviewing business leaders anyways to identify what are the top business problems that analytics could solve. Learning was interviewing them for something else for their learning strategy. So from those interviews, we took out some of the problems. And like I told you about commercial skill, medical sales representative skill, one of the other challenges was, the whole operations, the manufacturing is shifting to more remote-based manufacturing given the pandemic, right? So all these shifts which was happening needed a very different skill sets and profile sets of the workforce. Mm-hmm. These were not HR problems. These were business problems that business was not waiting for HR to solve. Mm-hmm. They had already opened their Excel sheets. They had opened their SharePoints. IT had created a SharePoint-based IT gig and started some projects already. There was Plan 100 to move talent flexibly in commercial. So we went and collected these problems and these solutions which were already existing. Mm-hmm. And we showcased this to the leaders saying, organization has this pain point. Organization is already embarked on these solutions. Here is how the state of art looks like. If we could solve skills together, this is how the jobs are moving. This is how the future will move. And this is how we can solve and, help you build more strategic and agile organization. And kind of that's how we had conversation. We created 1 or 2 fellow sponsors.
What I love about that is you basically say, you all are already doing this, and we're going to take some of this work off your plate. We're going to I'm sure you didn't say this, but basically professionalize it all, standardize it, and make it a lot better. So I love that approach.
The degree of difficulty feels like it probably went up when you got everybody in the room and you got everybody's kind of wish list. How do you avoid sort of falling into the trap of boiling the ocean, we sometimes call it? Is that your job to help prioritize?
I think, Chris, you've identified one of the biggest problem in trying to walk the skills path. And this is where the competency framework got caught, because you wanted to solve the whole world's problem and have the most articulate dictionary. I think as digital leader in these conversations, my job is to look at integrated, look at decluttering, look at simplifying, look at bringing technology right up front. In the old time, what used to happen is you were designing frameworks in HR and then giving it to technology. Then they were kind of getting some system and implementing it. Now it's all happening simultaneously to help save the point, because your design can actually influence how the product is designing. And if everybody is coming together at the same time, you can take advantage of not theorizing a lot. So that's my job, to share with them what AI can do and what AI cannot do. Where should they think about really going deep into making framework? Where they should just remain at surface level because rest of the work AI can do it easily for them. For example, job descriptions, that's where our skills sits mostly today. And in most of our organization, 80% of job descriptions are not updated. 20% position, which are in higher attrition, those job descriptions are also very custom updated, which means if 4 recruiters are hiring for those jobs, they would each update the JD differently. Today, in most of the technology platform, the inference of the skill from JD is very good. So when I'm in those conversations, I can very well say, don't worry about JDs. As long as you bring the JDs, then we'll make the system work to ensure that skills are pulled. But once skill ontology is pulled, the organization like AstraZeneca or Schneider Electric, they all use some custom skills and terms. No general skill ontology has that. So you have to have a human in loop curating that skill ontology. So you have to plan for that.
We talk to a lot of vendors and they're having the same problem, right? Like a skill is called something different in another company. Do you see a time when we're going to get good enough so that those can be translated, at least within a company?
The complexity problem that Chris raised, Danny, the question that you asked would be an ideal solution to it. In the skills, the only reason the skill initiative is very complex is because we still don't have that capability between multiple vendors. Like I have used Workday skills ontology, 200,000 skills, but if you really want to use the skills specifically from that, you have no way to curate, unplug and say, okay, in AZ Enterprise Workday, I'll just have this skill work across mine. So I think workers, it's still a very new thing that even innovative tool like Workday is developing or Cornerstone, they all are still trying to master their own skill ontology. How can they give power to different enterprise to curate and they can still control and be agile? But when you and I are trying to solve skills problem in our enterprise, let's say in AstraZeneca, I have a degreed skill index, I have a Workday skill, I have a work human skill. Then, if I'm using some other workforce planning tool, I have skills index from that. And today, even they don't have ability to speak to each other.
Right.
It all gets complicated really quickly.
It does. And then which of this should feed your job architecture?
Right.
And that's why I think the futuristic solution for companies which can afford, see, there's always 2-3-step solution. One is if you have a great a new mod, not the old ATSs, but a new ATS like iSIMS or Greenhouse, they have a skill. So you can work with them to try to make it your repository and then create API and connection in your ecosystem in a way that acts as master. But if you're a company like Schneider or AZ, where you can probably do a little bit more investment, then we will create a skills database outside, a master skills database. But
then everybody feeds into it.
2 people to do that. And I really think that will become imperative because it's no more nice to have. It's really very business critical.
So then for this, basically, skills database or depending on the size, skills data lake that you're creating is, as you have envisioned it or done it in the past, is that really just a conglomeration of everything? So you got the Greenhouse ontology in there, you got the Workday, you got the Degreed, you got whomever else, and you're putting it in and stitching it together. So you've got all of those in there, or are you still having some level of selection on like, okay, for, in the front end of the funnel, we're going to use Greenhouse. And then when we actually get people in, we're going to use Workday. And those are the two, and everybody else has to play with those two. How do you think about it?
You said it, Steffi. I think it's some combination of both. And, it's really like these days, these data lakes have also become very intelligent, right? You also have algorithm, you have data mesh. So I think we will have to choose. Like I always say, even when we are thinking about building a skills database, at first stage, having your core HCM, our core HCM can easily deliver 30-40% more value only if we decide to work on that data. I remember in 2005, I first implemented my first ever HRMS, which was PeopleSoft. And we had spent 1 year trying to get data tables right before we even embarked on implementing. And in that implementation, I could get 80% value out of that system. But today, when I look at how we've implemented Workday and all, I think because we are always in a hurry, right? We have a team, we need to show success. In 2 years, we roll up. We have not spent enough time standardizing our data sets. Mm-hmm. And we can still do that. To directly answer your question, we will have to look at skill sets in our current HCM and kind of, ensuring that employees are updating that profile if we can. And then at second level, making skill metrics, data lake as core. But it will be a gradual 2-step process.
So I have kind of a follow-up question to that. You mentioned 200,000 skills, and you mentioned curating them by a human. Are you focusing on all 200,000 skills, or are you taking certain sets of those skills and deciding which ones you're going to focus on?
That's a great question, Dan. I think we are looking at all of those skills. And yes, there are clusters and really looking at, and this is where we partner with even our product vendors to say, this is the task we need to do. And today we have to do it manually. Is there a way you can build us an algorithm to do that curation so that we can guide or something like that? But yes, today it's a manual.
What you're saying is really fascinating to me. And I think of the use case that you mentioned where you're helping people build their personal skills for the future, right? And we've heard other people talk about examples of laying out very clearly for people where the business is going and where we're going to need skills. And then also skills being a competitive advantage to AstraZeneca versus its competitors, right? You're never going to get those things. It strikes me that one of the most valuable things is the combination of skills that's kind of needed, not just a discrete list of things that I need to build, but where combinations of different types of skills come together to create opportunity and real value for the company. Have you done any work at that kind of level, or does that happen down in the business?
That work is happening in the business, Chris, and our learning academy and learning teams are doing that work, right? They're defining the sales capability, the commercial capabilities, and things like that. So an organization will still have to develop their own success skill sets required for the success. But I think what you're trying to say is, how do we present all this? I think even in competency dictionary, we got fixed saying HR created the state of art and maybe managers looked at it. But when it comes to employee choosing to go from position A to B, how did that competency dictionary help? And this is where today the power of AI and good platforms can really come into picture. And, you can just put your jobs there, skills there, and then Manisha can put in her experience there and let the AI do the work then to say, Manisha, basis, if you want to grow in current trajectory, these are the jobs, these are the projects that you can take up, these are the mentors you can connect to, these are the people you can follow. If you want to go very different, then here are the jobs, projects, mentors that you can do. If you want to go in a accelerated trajectory, then here are the people. So I think that's what platform can bridge. But how sharp that matching will be, how effective that matching will be, and how unique a competitive advantage that matching will be to your organization will also depend on how curated that skill list is for our organization. And I think, it will get just like, the data set will get sharper the more we use it. So we have to start somewhere with confidence. And after having said that, I also want to say that 60% of the skills will remain generic. For example, a data science, some skills will remain common across data scientists, but then, data scientists in pharma, in drug discovery, some skill sets will become unique.
We talk a little bit about where you get your data. So it's been really interesting to hear you talk about sometimes we get it from LinkedIn and we do it manually, and sometimes some of it comes from Degreed and Workday and Greenhouse if you're using it. What are your data sources for skills?
It's first is employee profile, right? Wherever employees are maintaining their profile, it is HCM. I think most organizations, including AZ, we have done a very rigorous drive even for our D&I initiative, to ask employees to really keep their profile updated. So employee profile in HCM, on the company page, whatever it is, then, with employee permission, their LinkedIn profile. So that becomes source of what could be the inferred current skill sets. Then there are those performance document or leadership evaluation documents as well, right? Where we have some defined skills or proficiency level. So we take some data sets from there. Then one critical component in trying to map skills is how is my skill sets doing to compare to where market is moving. So getting data sets from Burning Glass or MC where we can, or from a particular vendor for my industry, for my sector, is also very important. And I think there's a whole opportunity for each industry, for those kind of vendors to come together. And just like Hewitt does a basket, right? For rewards, it has now got stabilized. If, let's say, AstraZeneca wants to benchmark its reward, I make a positioning to say, I will peg my reward at 60th percentile of pharma market. And here are the 5 companies I will peg against. So I will take in basket, let's say Novartis, Roche, whatever. And I give that basket to Hewitt or Mercer, and they give me broad ranges for each of the role types that I have. So this has got stabilized for rewards, and I don't see any reason why we won't have some similar solution in future for skill, but we don't have one right now.
I have one more question sort of aligned with that. We're seeing more organizations look outside of systems for data or formal systems. So, for example, a lot of especially smaller companies that are looking to hire engineers will go to GitHub and take a look at GitHub profiles, and because it's a perfect example of the work that they do. Are you looking into things like that as well? And I mention it because you're already using LinkedIn. Are you using some of those other things as well?
We are using that. We are using LinkedIn. We use scholarly search paper references and things like that. So yes, we are all using different data sets. But the key is how do we not lose this knowledge once we are doing all this search for hiring? How do we use it on an ongoing basis?
Yeah. Interesting.
I think that gets into what I would like to talk about, which is we've talked about a lot of the potential things in kind of direction. What have you been able to do in the last year, and where are you hoping to get to in the next year or two?
Like I said, we have some of these use cases that we're working on, like Plan 100, Gig for IT, Operations Career Pathing. So we are designing proof of concepts around that and executing this in our current systems, while we are creating momentum and alignment around an integrated skill strategy for people to come together and invest. We are also looking at cleaning our skill ontology. So the work, the 200,000 skills project, really cleaning our job architecture and skills so that when we are doing our POCs, they really become successful. The experience is seamless for people so that they can see the power of how it all comes together. And lastly, we are also looking at building skills in workforce planning for some smaller, high impact teams, so that we can show how having your skills mapped along with the workforce plan can really help you take more granular decisions on upskilling and things like that.
That's cool.
What I love is you're using a combination of, yes, as Chris mentioned, getting all those leaders into the room and aligned around a central vision, but at the same time running these smaller scale experiments and doing some of the just, kind of grunt work that has to happen to enable this in the long term. So it's kind of like you have 3 different threads going through as you are doing this work.
I've learned it the hard way, Steffi. I think one of the things is, what are the 2 biggest challenges in all these things? And one of the challenges balancing, I call it securing the present versus shaping the future. So, all these things that we are doing is securing the present, because if we don't, work on what we have and show the proof points of to what extent can it deliver results and not deliver results, there's no way we can align people on shaping the future. Especially when it comes to HR, because we're still GNA, we're still part of GNA. We still considered cost center. So that's something I've learned the hard way. If you want people's attention on futuristic, disruptive innovation, then show them the proof point so that they can walk along.
I think it also leads nicely into some of our final questions. Like the first one I want to make sure we get to is you're now on at least company 2 of this particular Skills Odyssey. What are some of the critical lessons you've learned through this work?
I think 2 lessons we already talked about, right? One is it's a complex problem to solve. So, it's good to think in entirety, but don't try and go and solving it out all from day one. So start focused, identify problems worthy of solving, have a CXO sponsorship and attention. So let's say if you have 4 or 5 use cases, test it. Which one of this has CXO attention and they really care about outcomes, so that once you get and hit those outcomes, then he's ready to or she's ready to sponsor the next one. Start in a focused way. Lesson 2 is to design comprehensively. So while you start narrow, start focused, but when you're designing, don't design just for that narrow solution. At the time of design, you have liberty, right? To think, to dream, to say what could this solution bloom into, and take an ecosystem approach really. So that when you are going from one use case to second use case to third use case, you don't have to buy a new platform or inject a new database and things like that. Your system is really ready to go from one to another seamlessly. Third lesson is coalition of partners are needed. If you go alone on skills, and couple of times in both my organizations, I have seen it happen. It's not that people before have not tried, right? But if you go alone and if you don't share, like sometimes hiring teams is ahead of the curve. They are hiring digital already. So they want to go alone and build digital skill sets. Sometimes rewards team is wanting to go alone. Sometimes learning team, because they have LXP. I have to say it. All learning teams are a little ahead in skills game. They have LXP and they were anyways earlier competency owners. So they want to go on their own. So how do you bring people together and IT and data scientists and business leaders? I know it sounds bureaucratic when I say get many people together, but I have learned the hard way that spend 80% of the time talking and aligning. But the speed that you will get because of that investment in the last 20% of the time will be phenomenal. But if you decide to invest only 10%, 20% time in talking, your 80% time will still not get you the result that you're looking for. And I think my toughest one is, get support from the HR to break the HR silos to come together, because otherwise we are just solving for piecemeal. Something which can be very strategic and value creating will just become something very mundane.
HR silos, I've never heard of those. So, well, we just have a moment left. So let's hit just 2 questions, I think. The first one is, what do you see as the future? You've been thinking about this problem for a long time in different ways. And what do you think we'll be doing in 5 years that we're not talking about today?
That's a tough one. I think we're talking about everything, but we're still not able to do things in a more integrated and cohesive way. We are doing smaller experiments, but are we able to show the entire workforce plan? For example, to grow my company for $5 billion, I need to have 5,000 more headcounts in these 10 geographies. And here are the skill sets that I'm looking at. I think a lot of us are far away from that. And, if we can do it real time and really make it available to employee managers, link it to the development plan and growth plans, it will be phenomenal. So I think on skills, that's my take, that hopefully in 5 years, this will all be done and dusted. And we will really be living in an agile organization where, I can work 30% of time in marketing, 20% of time in strategy, and 10% of time in HR, depending on whose interest lies where. And I think some consulting organizations are getting there. Some service IT services organizations are getting there, but they're only 5% or 2%. Most of us are behind. I also wanted to add a few more points to this question. In future, what we're not talking about today is employee agency and reimagining employee contract with organization.
Yeah.
Solving skill problems can really democratize opportunity, career growth, employability for employees. We are still not talking about that. We're still talking very much from HR lens, right? So how do we flip that? And that will solve the great resignation that we're facing today. Second thing is, again, employee lens, how to redesign meaningful jobs with manageable workload. We have our job designs and structures are archaic. And primarily because we write it in such a complex way with so many, I used to have 4 pages functional KPI metrics and things like that, which we've done. But I think there is, once we can decode jobs and skills and tasks, we should be able to mix and match and create something more meaningful at much more speed. And if it's not working, create something else, really move faster to create that. And last is my favorite, right? Virtualize the HR operations. HR is supposed to be a kind of accelerating a lot of this, right? But most of us in HR are stuck in our administrative tasks. And then with COVID, there's additional tasks that has come to our plate. So unless we virtualize all of the administrative tasks by using technology, I don't think we can create bandwidth in HR to coach care and, kind of support all this intelligence skills work and future organization development.
Just real quick, final question we ask every guest who comes on, which is what we call the purpose question. And that is, why do you personally do the work that you do?
Growing up, I am less clearer now, but when I was a young girl, I was very clear that I wanted to be a doctor. And the reason I wanted to be a doctor, growing up in India, I had, lots of people around who could not afford medical services and things like that. So I was really motivated to do my bit to serve humanity. But, it's very competitive to write medical exams in India. I couldn't figure it. So I ended up studying science, then moved to HR. I actually joined operations, manufacturing operations. And in my rotation, I came to HR and I fell in love with it. Because I saw that this function really has power to create more energizing, more engaging, more motivated workforce. And I thought neither strategy nor finance, I had rotation in all those functions, nor manufacturing, none of those functions has that superpower that HR has. So I have never had a dull day believing it, exercising it, pushing for it. I have failed maybe 40% of the time, but that's what keeps me going, sparking the potential in every individual.
Well, Manisha, thank you so much for joining us. This conversation was just wonderful and both, I think, a blend of inspirational and practical. So we are just grateful for you and for your time.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm a very poor speaker. See, I made lots of notes. But I think I could just not do enough justice, especially for example. So if you want me to redo some pieces, let me know.
No, it was really great. In fact, I texted Stacia halfway through. I'm like, she's so articulate. You're very succinct in your answers and they were clear. It was wonderful.
So grateful to you guys. You guys are amazing with your words and, your inspiration. I think one of my self-development, and I've told you all last time also, is to write, is to express, because what's the use of building progressive practices if you're not debating it out there, isn't it? And not putting it out for others to comment and judge.
Well, we did today. You don't have to do it with writing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Workplace Stories. Danny and Stacia, how can our listeners get more involved in the podcast?
Well, they can subscribe and rate us on the podcast platform of their choice.
They can also share this or their favorite episode with a colleague or a friend.
You can check out the beautiful handcrafted transcripts at redthreadresearch.com/podcast and see what else we have to offer as far as research goes.
Or, Stacia, they could
Consider joining the conversation and community by joining our Red Thread membership.
A big thanks to our guests on all our podcast seasons for sharing their insights and thoughts. And of course, we should thank our beloved listeners. Thank you.
Thank you.
The team would like to thank Vizier and Degreed for their sponsorship of this podcast season, The Skills Odyssey 2. A big thank you to our season sponsors. For more information, you can find links to their websites in the show notes for this podcast. This podcast is a production of Red Thread Research and the Learning Futures Group.